Hello, friends, how are you? I hope you're doing great. So, today's topic is states of consciousness, and there I'm going to tell you a story of an unconscious killing. So, let's start. During the night of May 23, 1987, Neith Parks, a 23-year-old Canadian with a wife, a baby daughter, and heavy gambling debts, got out of his bed, climbed into his car, and drove 15 miles to the home of his wife's parents in the suburbs of Toronto. There, he attacked them with a knife, killing his mother-in-law and severely injuring his father-in-law. Parks then drove to a police station and stumbled into the building, holding up his bloody hands and saying, "I think I killed someone, my hands." Police arrested him and took him to a hospital where surgeons repaired several deep cuts on his hands. Only then did police discover that he did indeed assaulted his in-laws. Parks claimed that he could not remember anything about the crime. He said that he remembered going to sleep in his bed, then awakening in the police station with bloody hands, but nothing in between. His defense was that he had been asleep during the entire incident, and he was not aware of his actions. Not surprisingly, no one believed his explanation at first. However, further investigations established that he did have a long history of sleepwalking. He had no motive for the crime, and despite repeated attempts to trip him up in numerous interviews, he was completely consistent in his story, which also fit the timeline of events. This was examined by a team of sleep specialists who found that the patterns of brain waves that occurred while he slept was very abnormal. The specialists eventually concluded that sleepwalking, probably precipitated by stress and anxiety over his financial troubles, was the most likely explanation of his aberrant behavior. They also agreed that such a combination of stressors was unlikely to happen again, so he was not likely to undergo another such violent episode, and was probably not a hazard to others. Given his combination of evidence, the jury acquitted Park of murder and assault charges. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. Consciousness is defined as our subjective awareness of ourselves and our environment. The experience of consciousness is fundamental to human nature. We all know what it means to be conscious, and we assume, although we can never be sure, that other human beings experience their consciousness similarly to how we experience ours. Study of consciousness has long been important to psychologists and plays a role in many important psychological theories. For example, Sigmund Freud's personality theory is differentiated between the unconscious and conscious aspects of behavior, and present-day psychologists distinguish between automatic, unconscious, and controlled conscious behaviors, and between implicit, unconscious, and explicit conscious memory. Some philosophers and religious practices argue that the mind or soul and the body are separate entities. For example, the idea that the mind, non-material entity, is separate from the physical body. In contrast to the dualists, psychologists believe that consciousness exists in the brain, not separate from it. In fact, psychologists believe that consciousness is the result of the activity of the many neural connections in the brain, and that we experience different states of consciousness depending on what our brain is currently doing. The study of consciousness is also important to the fundamental psychological question regarding the presence of free will. Although we may understand that and believe that some of our behaviors are caused by forces that are outside our awareness, we nevertheless believe that we have control over and are aware that we are engaging in most of our behaviors. To discover that we or even someone else has engaged in a complex behavior, such as driving in a car and causing severe harm to others without being at all conscious of one's actions, is so unusual as to be shocking. And yet, psychologists are increasingly certain that a great deal of our behavior is caused by processes of which we are unaware and over which we have little or no control. Our experience of consciousness is functional because we use it to guide and control our behavior and to think logically about problems. Consciousness allows us to plan activities and to monitor our progress towards the goals we set for ourselves. And consciousness is fundamental to our sense of morality. We believe that we have the free will to perform moral actions while avoiding immoral behaviors. But in some cases, consciousness may become aversive. For example, when we become aware that we are not living up to our own goals or expectations, or when we believe that other people perceive us negatively. In these cases, we may engage in behaviors that help us escape from consciousness, for example, through the use of alcohol or other psychoactive drugs. Because the brain varies in its current level and type of activity, consciousness is transitory. If we drink too much coffee or beer, the caffeine or alcohol influences the activity in our brain, and our consciousness may change. When we are anesthetized before an operation or experience a concussion after a knock on the head, we may lose consciousness entirely as a result of changes in brain activity. We also lose consciousness when we sleep, and it is with this altered state of consciousness. So this was a little introduction to states of consciousness, and we talked about an unconscious feeling. I hope you are getting it all, and it's very easy for you to understand. If so, subscribe my channel, like and share my audios. Thank you for listening to me. I'll be here with this topic. Till then, be blessed, be happy and healthy. Thank you. Bye-bye.